Are you playing an Aasimar and wondering how you can make them more than just a celestial-themed human? In this video, I'm going to break down how you can truly embody the divine spark of an Aasimar. We'll break down what's in the 2024 Player's Handbook, what it says about them narratively, we'll explore their unique mechanics, and we'll dive into some game-changing questions that you can ask yourself to really roleplay an Aasimar so it stands out at the table. So stick around, because by the end of this video you'll have everything that you need to make a character that is as complex and radiant as the heavens themselves. But let's start by talking about the narrative and lore aspects of the Aasimar as it's presented in the 2024 Player's Handbook. So it tells us a few things. One, they are actually mortals, but they are mortals with a spark of the upper planes in their souls. The upper planes, for those that are less familiar with the cosmology of Dungeons & Dragons Multiverse, are the planes that represent goodness. They can be descended from angelic beings, or they can be infused with celestial power. So they're not necessarily angels by descent. They may perhaps have been gifted celestial power from somewhere, perhaps. An Aasimar can tap into their celestial spark to manifest light, healing, or if they so wish, a little bit of heavenly fury. And they can arise among any mortal population, regardless of their race or their culture. They do resemble their mortal parents, as I mentioned. They may perhaps be a halfling-based Aasimar, or they could be an orc Aasimar, or they could even look like a tiefling and actually be an Aasimar. Despite looking like their mortal parents, they do have some distinctly celestial features, which may manifest as some of the following: metallic freckles, luminous eyes, maybe even a visible halo, and skin tones that might be reminiscent of angels, which might be something like silver or opalescent green or a coppery red colour. And Aasimar can live up to 160 years, which, if you come from an elven background, may be a bit of a downgrade if you suddenly became an Aasimar. But for most other species, that is going to be an upgrade, particularly if you come from a human culture. But these celestial traits that manifest in an Aasimar, they do start quite subtle, but eventually they become more pronounced, particularly as the Aasimar starts to learn how to reveal their full celestial nature, which is actually represented mechanically in the way that the Aasimar is presented within the game, which we'll talk about in a moment. In fact, let's get on to the mechanics. First of all, an Aasimar is classified as a humanoid creature type, as all of the player character species are within the 2024 Player's Handbook. And you get to choose between being a medium-sized creature, which is about 4 to 7 feet tall in this case, or a small creature about 2 to 4 foot tall. And you get to choose that when you select the species. This is representative of the fact that an Aasimar could come from any particular species, from any of the playable species in this case. Again, being representative of a gnome, perhaps, if you're playing small, or indeed human if you're playing medium. And they have a speed of 30 feet, which is average speed. In terms of the kind of mechanical abilities that they get, you have celestial resistance, which means that you are resistant to necrotic damage or radiant damage. And for those that are unfamiliar with the rules of D&D 5e, and particularly the 2024 rules, resistance is representative of taking half damage from something. So in this case, if you take necrotic damage or radiant damage, you're only going to take half of what you would otherwise take to represent your celestial resistance. You also have dark vision, which is an ability to see in the dark or in dim light, up to a range of 60 feet. You also have healing hands, so as a magic action you get to touch a creature and roll a number of d4 equal to your proficiency bonus, which at level 1 will start out at +2, and the creature regains a number of hit points equal to the total that you roll. And once you use that trait, you don't get to use it again until you finish a long rest, so it's a once-a-day thing. You also have the Light Bearer feature. You know the light cantrip. A cantrip is like a spell that you can cast at will at 0 cost, and charisma is your spell casting ability for doing so. So if you're in a situation where even using your dark vision in darkness is not enough for you to be able to see clearly enough, as you can use the light cantrip, or indeed, if you are with some humans or other species that don't have dark vision, then you can be the bearer of light for them, quite literally. But the main feature is celestial revelation. Now, I alluded to the fact that the manifestation of these celestial powers growing is represented mechanically. This is it, because you don't actually get this until you hit level 3. The first couple of levels that you're playing in Aasimar, whilst you're still trying to find out and learn some of these celestial powers, perhaps, you won't have access to this. But from level 3 onwards, you do. And with this feature, Celestial Revelation, you get to transform as a bonus action using one of 3 options, which we'll come to in a moment. And you get to choose that option each time you transform. So you don't have to choose it and then you're stuck with it. You get to choose it as you wish. And that transformation lasts for 1 minute, which in combat is total to 10 rounds, or until you choose to end it, which you can do at any time without having to use an action to do so. And once you transform, you also can't do so again until you finish a long rest. So that is also a once a day thing. And once on each of your turns before the transformation ends, you get to deal extra damage to one target when you deal damage to it with an attack or a spell. And the extra damage is equal to your proficiency bonus, which again at level 1 would be +2 and would still be the case at level 3 when you first get this, but that grows as you grow in level. And the extra damages type is either necrotic if you're using the necrotic shroud option, or radiant for heavenly wings and inner radiance. But these transformations also come with a few extra features depending on which one of those 3 you choose. So if you choose heavenly wings, what you get is 2 spectral wings that sprout from your back temporarily, and until the transformation ends you have a fly speed equal to your speed, which base level for an Aasimar is 30-foot speed. So for a minute, you have a fly speed of 30 feet at a base level. Or you can choose the inner radiance option when you transform, at which point searing light temporarily radiates from your eyes and mouth for the duration, and you shed bright light in a 10-foot radius and then dim light for an additional 20 feet. And at the end of each of your turns, each creature within 10 feet of you takes radiant damage equal to your proficiency bonus. Now be careful with this one, because it is each creature, doesn't matter whether they're friend or foe. So if you do light this up and you get a little bit too close to your friends, they are going to take some damage. And the third option is the necrotic shroud, in which case your eyes briefly become pools of darkness and flightless wings sprout from your back temporarily. Creatures other than your allies, so this is specifically hostile creatures, within 10 feet of you, must succeed on a charisma saving throw, or have the frightened condition until the end of your next turn. The frightened condition meaning that they can't willingly move towards you. The DC to save that is 8 plus your charisma modifier and your proficiency bonus. So even if you had no charisma modifier, it would be a starting DC of 10 because of DC 8 plus your proficiency bonus. We've gone through the narrative properties and the lore around Aasimar. We've gone through the mechanical benefits of playing an Aasimar and how those two tie in together. But really what we want to do, and really the main purpose of this video, is to give you these roleplay prompts, questions that you can ask yourself about your Aasimar character to try and make them more than just, as I said at the top of the video, a celestial-themed human. You want to make them feel a little bit different. And I think that's particularly important with species like Aasimar, who have got this kind of almost otherworldly aspect about them. So these are some questions that you can ask yourself. I'm going to put together a worksheet that I'll put the link down in the doobly-doo for you to have a look at and download, print off, fill out if you're playing an Aasimar character. But you can check that out here, and this will be all the questions that are here. First of all, what is the origin of your celestial spark? It mentions in the player's handbook that you could be descended from an angelic being or be infused with a celestial power. Really, that's one of the main questions that you might want to ask yourself to start with, is where did this come from? What type is it? Am I descended from an angelic being, or was I infused with celestial power? And either way, how did that connection come about? If you're descended from an angelic being, presumably your parents, or maybe even your ancestors further down the line, have had some interaction with some angelic beings. Or if you were infused with celestial power, why may that have been, or how might that have come about? How does your celestial heritage influence your personality? Does your connection to the upper planes make you more compassionate? Maybe they make you proud, actually, or maybe even a little bit conflicted, perhaps because of your connection to those upper planes and the celestial heritage in kind of contrast to where it is that you come from. So perhaps, for example, you might be an Aasimar who comes from a background of perhaps a criminal family, for example. That could create some degree of conflict for you, which may create a bit of an identity crisis. Or it could be something else entirely, as the question suggests. But a question to ask yourself: you're aware of this celestial heritage, and it's going to impact your personality somehow. So that's a very direct question that you can ask yourself: what impact does that have? And what is your relationship with your celestial nature? Do you embrace that celestial spark fully, or do you struggle with the expectations and responsibilities that come with it? If you are of celestial nature, perhaps there are these expectations that you are going to always do the right thing, that you are going to be a good person. And perhaps that doesn't necessarily sit true with the reality of what your character's life experiences or personality are. And is that a struggle for your character? Is that something that may be a core feature of their relationship with the wider D&D world, or indeed multiverse? And how do you feel, conversely, about your mortal side? Obviously, there's these celestial qualities, but you are also a mortal. You're not going to live forever, perhaps unlike some of the other celestial creatures in the D&D multiverse. You do have limited time, albeit 160 years, which is more than some species, such as humans. But you are still mortal. So what do you do to reconcile the two aspects of yourself? There's a duality with an Aasimar of being perhaps maybe from an orc background, whilst also being half celestial in that regard. And is there conflict between the two, and how can you marry the two, if at all? What role do you believe you were destined to fulfill? So what I like about Aasimar is they have this certain element of being like the chosen one, kind of like Hercules in Disney's Hercules, because I don't think it's accurate to the myth. But in Disney's Hercules, he's a half god, and he feels destined for greatness. He feels like he doesn't fit in, and he feels like he's destined for a little bit more than perhaps the life that he's living as a young lad. Do you feel a call to a divine purpose, or are you searching for some greater meaning in your life? And how do other characters react to your celestial traits? Are people awed by these qualities? Are they perhaps a little bit suspicious? Are they maybe even envious or indifferent towards those features and abilities? And of course, you can't speak for everyone with relation to this, but perhaps you can talk about your background and where you've come from and people that you've met along the way in your backstory, and how they may have reacted to your celestial traits. Has it been something that has been to your advantage to have these in terms of your social standing? Or has it actually been something that has made things more difficult because perhaps you have been met with envy, as the question suggests, and so people don't want to give you opportunities as much because they'd rather try and hold you back? Or perhaps have they actually put you on a pedestal and really pushed you really hard because they have this view that you are more capable than perhaps others because of these celestial traits that you have? How do you balance light, healing, and fury? Of course, celestial beings are known for their lightness and their healing abilities, but also they do have the potential for great wrath. You hear all these stories in myth of godly creatures or celestial creatures being displeased and punishing individuals for not following the path, whatever that path might be. As an Aasimar, you have the potential for either great kindness and also wrath. So the question really is, how do you find that balance, and how do you decide when to use one or the other? And again, there's that kind of mechanical quality that you can lean into with this question with regard to that celestial revelation, using the heavenly, more radiant qualities, or perhaps that necrotic shroud for when you're angry, perhaps. But either way, how do you balance the good with the fury? And what celestial features have manifested into you? Now, this is not so much the mechanical features, because you're going to have those, but thinking about the specifics of what your appearance looks like. I went through a few that are mentioned in the player's handbook, and of course you could come up with your own perhaps. But what is it about your look, your character's look, that makes them distinctly more celestial than their mortal counterparts? Perhaps think about the metallic freckles, the luminous eyes, that halo, or those angelic skin tones. And the other question to ask yourself is, when you have them and when you are around other people, do you choose to present them, or do you choose to try and hide them? Are you insecure about them, or is it something that you're very proud of? And you'll have an idea from the earlier questions which one that might likely be. But of course, you don't necessarily have to go for the obvious choice as it relates to that previous question. And what is your relationship with the upper planes, these planes of goodness? Do you feel a connection to the divine realms, their inhabitants, or a particular celestial figure, for example? And that might be something to discuss with your DM with regard to your backstory, who that celestial figure might be, if there is one. Do you feel like there is a home for you in the divine realms, for example? And indeed, do you see other celestial beings as your kin, or do you feel alien to them? And either way, how does that shape your worldview? And how do you navigate life as a bridge between the celestial and the mortal worlds? Again, this duality that keeps coming up. As someone who's got a foot in both worlds, the celestial and the mortal realms, how do you interact with mortals? Do you kind of interact as perhaps somebody greater than them, perhaps, or somebody there to serve them, perhaps? And equally, how do you interact with divine beings and others? When you're kind of, let's say you're playing an Aasimar cleric, do you commune with your deity as if you are? Rather than talking to them with reverence, do you perhaps talk to them as if you are their equal, which I think could be a fun thing to roleplay, for example. All right, mate, just check it in, see how you are. Whereas another character might be like, oh, dear lord of the seas, blah, 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 blah. You're just like, all right, mate, can you just make sure that it's not stormy out there? I think would be a fun thing to roleplay. Something to consider. How do you interact with both sides of your ancestry? So those are the questions for running through an Aasimar. As I say, there is a link down below to a worksheet that you can print off and go through and scribble some things down, or just follow along this video and kind of ask the questions. I am committed to really trying to help people up their roleplay game, and particularly I find the species are very interesting because it's very easy to be sat at a D&D table and playing another species and utilizing all of the traits, but the role-playing feeling the same. And just separating the species out from a human and making them feel somewhat different, I think, is going to go a real long way to making your character and your role-playing stand out. So I hope you found that helpful. If you did have any other questions that you think are worth asking, share them with others that are watching this video in the comments below, and perhaps even answer any of those questions and pop them in the comments below as well. I'd love to see what people are coming up with regard to the Aasimar. We also have a number of other videos with relation to other species of Dungeons & Dragons and how you can roleplay those. So if you'd be interested in those, I will link to the playlist for you to check out those. But otherwise, if you found this video helpful, do hit that like button and subscribe to the channel.